Hey everyone, in this video we are going to learn how to build an applicant tracking system from scratch using Caspio. Whether you're new to no-code or would just like to see how to launch an application, you are in the right place. We'll walk through everything step by step, building tables, forms, workflows, and user access, and I'll explain the thinking behind each part so it's both practical and fun. Let's jump in, see a live demo of the app, and start building. All right, let's begin with a quick demo of this application. As I mentioned just a moment ago, I'll give you a quick overview. And the whole premise of this app is to have a public-facing job board that anybody who comes to our website will be able to review all the open positions. And if we happen to think that our resume is a good fit, we can go into details, review the job description, requirements, any other information, and then we can go ahead and click on the apply button. Let's fill this out very quickly. Let's just go with maybe Ken Lee at applicant.com. We'll just put something random for a phone number, and I will go ahead and paste the resume. Now, the resume is for a back-end developer, front-end, back-end developer, full stack, and hopefully it's going to be a good fit. As you can see, the description here is lacking my sample data, and what I am using inside the Caspio platform, we're utilizing AI as well for HR to help them, vet out a lot of these applicants. And what we're doing is we're grabbing the match score. So we're asking AI to compare the resume against the job description and come back with a score from 0 to 100 of how good of a fit this candidate is. And I also have a fit summary, just a quick description, asking the AI to let me know if this is going to be a good fit. Again, my sample data is lacking, but we're going to get the result nevertheless. So let's go to hit submit as Ken Lee. And our submission was successful. Let's go inside as HR. So once you log in as the HR employee, you're going to be able to see all the applicants. Let's go ahead and reload the page. We have some filtering capabilities. There's Ken. We can also see the match score. Now this is AI driven. It's 75 out of 100, and I can quickly see the fit summary suggested by the AI. I can quickly read that. Now, of course, as HR, we can still drill into details if I want to see the entire resume, any other information that the applicant submitted. And if I think it's going to be a good fit, I can set up an interview with one of our staff members. I will select the interviewer, in this case, Sarah Lee. As you can see, I don't have a lot of sample data in my demo, but we will select Sarah Lee. We'll set up the interview date, maybe Friday. Interview type can be a phone interview, and we'll hit submit. All right, so we've set up that interview for Sarah Lee. Now, as HR, we also have the ability to manage jobs. So these are all of the active jobs, in other words, published to the job board. But if I don't want to publish a certain job anymore, let's say we're no longer hiring for that position, we can edit any of the information about that job, including title, description, and here I can deactivate or make that position inactive. In addition to that, we can also create a new job very quickly. So let's say we are hiring for a new position. We can quickly fill out this form and post that to our job board. Now, as a staff member, once we log in, we're able to see all of our pending interviews and completed interviews. And this is me logged in as Sarah Lee. If I reload that page, and here's the one for Ken that was set up for me by John Doe, who happens to be HR employee. And as Sarah Lee, I can now provide my interview notes, score, recommendation, and set the status to completed. Along the way, you can also create different types of workflows with emails. We're not going to focus on that in today's demo and presentation, but we are going to build the core functionality of this app and everything that I just demoed. It's a quick little app. You could also go as far as creating a login screen for your applicants if you want them to be able to see the status of their application. But again, for us, I think just sending an email to the applicant, letting them know if they were accepted or rejected should suffice. So we did not build an application that has an applicant login as well. But we have HR, we have staff that can log in, and a couple of different interfaces here where they can manage the interviews, applicants, and jobs. So with that said, let's go into Caspio and let's see how we can go about building something like this. All right, let's go ahead and begin. As you can see here, Caspio provides two distinct frameworks for building applications, Bridge and Flex. Bridge has been around for 25 years since Caspio's inception, and I recommend Bridge for tech-savvy business users who have a website, who are not afraid to do some coding to achieve a precise outcome. I also recommend Bridge for anyone who has a website and wants the application to live on their website. So you host your own website, you build the app in Bridge, and you deploy that application to your own website. Flex, on the other hand, is new. It's a newer framework. It's designed for ease of use, and it's really meant for you to get your application up and running quickly. There's no coding involved whatsoever. It's mostly drag and drop, and Caspio hosts every aspect of your application, from your logo, your navigation menu, all the interfaces, literally everything Caspio will host. And in today's video, we are going to build our application using the Flex framework. I already have this application created. That's the one that I demoed just a minute ago. But today we are going to build an application from scratch. And as soon as you click on that button, it takes you inside the framework for Flex. Here you can quickly give your application a name. So click on the pencil icon. Let's call this Flex ATS, which is going to stand for Applicant Tracking System. I will click Save. And that now becomes my application name. If you go back out to the home page, you will now see that app container listed underneath the Flex tab. Let's open it. And the number one place where you want to begin is always going to be the Tables tab. That's where you build all of your tables, and that's where all of your data is going to reside. So we're going to go down to Tables, and this application is going to have a total of 9 tables. Now, don't get overwhelmed. We're going to build all of these tables together. I just want you to know that we're going to have 3 or 4 main tables, and the rest of them are just going to be simple lookup tables that we can use in drop-downs in our submission forms and reports. So let's begin by setting up our first table. And I would say the main table maybe here is going to be the jobs table, because we need to be able to store all the job information. And if you don't have a database background, the first field that you always want to add is going to be a primary key to uniquely identify each row in the table, right? It's commonly referred to as a primary key. So we're going to list this as job ID, and Caspio provides 4 different ID types that we can choose from. These are automatically generated. I always like to go with GUID, which is the GUID. It's a long and secure ID. And again, it's going to be automatically generated. Then we go ahead and list created by ID, or maybe just created by. We want to know which HR staff member created that job at any point. Then we can have job title and all of your other typical fields that you would find inside this table, maybe job description. We will edit the data types in just a moment. We have department. We have location. We're also going to have employment type. We have status. We're also going to have date created and date updated. All right, so let's take a look at these fields that we have. Job title likely is going to be text 255, right? It's not going to exceed 255 characters. Job description most likely is going to need long text. So we want to change the data type to text 64,000. Department, text 255, location, status, employment type, all of these are going to be text 255. And then date created, we're going to turn this into a timestamp, stamp on insert, and then date updated, also a timestamp, but we're going to switch this to stamp on update. Always good to track when something was added to a table and when something was updated. And that's it for my first table. Let's save it. Let's give it a name. We're going to call this F for Flex, PBL, Jobs. Okay, very first table, done, simple. It's an empty table. We built it from scratch. If you ever need assistance building your tables, Caspio does provide the AI assistant. You can input your prompt here if you want AI to quickly build out a table for you with some fields and data types, and then you can click on edit to modify each one of those fields and data types that the AI came back with. You can also import your existing Excel file if you have it in a comma delimited file, CSV. As long as you have your column headings, you can bring that into Caspio. It'll save you from building tables from scratch. All right, for our second table, let's go ahead and build our maybe applicants table. We want to know what applicants applied for what jobs. So let's go with applicant ID. Again, that's going to be a do it. Let's go with job ID. And now this becomes a foreign key to our jobs table. We want to know what applicant is associated with what job. It's a one-to-many. One job can have many applicants, right? So we always want to stamp the job ID inside the applicants table. Let's have the name of the applicant. Let's have email. Let's have phone. We definitely want to collect the resume. Let's have job description. I'll explain why in just a second. We also have that inside the jobs table, but we definitely want to have this inside the applicant table so that we can compare that with the resume. Let's also have date applied. Let's have status, match, score, and I'll just put AI here and also fit summary AI. So now let me explain a few of these fields. Resume is going to be text 64,000. However, this allows the applicant to paste their resume inside a text area. You can also use the attachment data type if you wanted to submit an actual file, maybe a PDF. That's also available to you as well. So for me, I'm just going to use text 64,000. Job description also going to be text 64,000. Date applied is going to be a timestamp. Status text 255. And then match score AI. And fit summary, we're going to turn this into a number because we want that to be from 0 to 100. And the fit summary is going to be text 64,000. Now, the reason why I add these two fields, Caspio has the capability of sending data to OpenAI using GPT Connect, and then we can write the results back into our Caspio table, all behind the scenes. It's very seamless, and it's all done without any coding. It's simply just point and click, and we are going to learn that today as well. Once we're done with our table, we can just simply save it, and let's give it a name, F for Flex, TBL, applicants. All right, our third main table is going to be the interviews. So let's go ahead and call this interview ID. Once again, GUID is my choice. It's a long and secure ID that's automatically generated. We want applicant ID. We want, user ID. We also want interview date. We want interview type. Interview notes. Now, you might have your own naming convention for your fields. This is just what I'm used to. We have the score. We have recommendation. And we also have status of the interview. So now let's change a few of these fields. Let me explain the applicant ID here. Each applicant could have multiple interviews with multiple staff members. So we want to associate the applicants and interviews. We also want the user ID in this field because we want to stamp which of our staff members is going to be interviewing this person. Interview date is going to be a date and time. Interview type, interview notes is going to be text 64,000. As you can see the pattern, if you have long text and you're submitting long text, you always want to go with text 64,000. We have the score. We can turn this into a number. Recommendation is going to be a simple yes or no. And finally, we have the status. That's it for this table. Let me click save, and let's call this F, EBL, interviews. Now, one thing that I forgot to explain, let's go back to our applicants table. The reason why I add job description here as well inside the applicants table, even though we already have it inside the jobs table, is when the applicants apply for a job, what we're going to do is we're going to send the job description to the form, to the applicant form. We're going to hide that field. And the reason why I want to store the job description inside the applicants table as well is because this table is going to have the resume and job description. And I don't want to call it limitation, but today Caspio can only look at data from a single table and store the result to the same table, right? We cannot look at a different table, compare it with another table, and store the result. So that's why I need to have both bits of information inside this table in order to analyze and compare the two fields. And then we simply store the score and fit summary once we analyze both of these two information. All right, let's continue. Let's build some of our lookup tables. So we have a simple field here. Let's go maybe with departments. So let's call it departments for a field. We're going to hit save, and let's call this F PBL departments. All right, inside that table, let's list down a few departments that we're going to use. These are going to be simple static values that we're going to see inside our dropdown. So maybe we have sales, marketing, we have HR, engineering. Let's also list down administration and perhaps support services. So those are our departments at our company. Let's go back out, and now we have a simple lookup table. Let's build a few more. How about interview type? Let's save it. Let's call this F PBL interview types. And for the interview types, we can have a phone call, we can have video, and in person. Back out to the tables menu, and that's our second lookup table. Let's have a few more. The reason why we create these lookup tables, you can also build custom values as you're developing your application inside a dropdown, but it's much more efficient and streamlines the building process. You don't have to repeat yourself by typing up these custom values in submission form and reports. You quickly link to a table, and it's much, much faster to build out this way. All right, for my third lookup table, let's have the applicant status. Let's save it. F PBL applicant statuses. And this table is going to have quite a few, or maybe it's up to you how many different statuses you can set to an applicant, but you go through the interview process. So you might have a new applicant, maybe under review. You might have screening, shortlisted. You might also have rejected. Say, for example, you looked at the applicant right away. You felt that, it's not a good fit. You can reject them immediately. And upon rejection, you can also have automatic emails go out to the applicant, letting them know in a nice way that you're just not a good fit for this position, but thank you for applying. Maybe interview scheduled. Maybe we have interviewed, awaiting response. You might have interviewed and then rejected. How about we also list on hold? We might also have offer extended, offer rejected, and let's also have offer accepted and hired. So these are in the typical interview process. You might set the status as you go through the interview, screening, interviewing, accepting, sending an offer. So those are the ones that we want to list inside this table. Let's go back out to the table menu, and then let's list down maybe two more tables for our lookup tables. Let's go with interview statuses. So now this is as you're interviewing the candidate, the staff member can say from pending to completed. So let's go ahead and save this table, give it a name FTBL interview statuses, and click finish. Let's open it and let's list pending to completed. And the final table, or the lookup table I want to create, is for employment type. So let's call this employment type. Let's save the table and give it a name FTBL employment types. And inside this table, we're going to list a part-time, full-time, contractor, and maybe intern. All right, so far we have 8 tables. We are going to create another table, which is going to be a directory that's going to store all of our staff employees. And let's go ahead and do that next. We're going to go back out to the table, to the main menu. And what you want to understand here is Caspio provides directories, which is our built-in IDP, or identity provider, for managing and provisioning all of the user information, including their password, if they can log in or not log into the application. So let's navigate over to directories. We are going to create a brand new one, and let's call this F for Flex, dir directory, underscore or let's just call it users. Okay. And just so it's clear that this is for applicant tracking system, you can add ATS, abbreviate that so that you know for what application this directory is for. Let's hit create. And as you can see, there are no users inside this directory just yet. It's empty. Now, as you're developing your applications in Caspio, I recommend that you add sample users initially. And then when you go in production, when your app is live, then you can add your actual employees, invite them to the application. They can activate their account and be able to begin logging in. So let's go ahead and create our user. And I will just say maybe John Doe at hr.com. You have some optional fields here, John Doe. Now, identity provider, you can see Caspio, that's listed by default. Okay. If you're using Okta or Microsoft Active Directory or a different IDP, external IDP, you can link that to Caspio inside this tab. And now anybody inside that directory or that IDP will be able to log into the applications you develop inside Caspio. I will activate the user. I'm not going to send an email because that's a fictitious email. I will just simply generate the password. And let's just maybe rename this to test123 ! Something easy to remember. And I don't want the user to change the password on first login. And we don't need to worry about that at this point. I just want to be able to log in as John, input my password, and be able to test out the functionality. You can create groups under this tab. Really great if you're looking to organize by department, things like that. And it also helps when later on when you set up the role, and we will learn about that in a few minutes, you can move an entire group of users inside a specific role versus one user at a time. Application access, also inside the Flex framework or Bridge, if you have multiple applications, you can allow users to gain access to multiple applications inside your account. So let's hit create, and we should be able to see John Doe listed as HR. I'm just going to quickly add one more. So let's go with maybe Sarah Lee at staff.com. We will add the optional fields, Sarah Lee. Activate the user, generate password, test, 123 ! And don't change the password on first login, and hit create. And that's how easy it is to manage all of your users that are logging into the applications. You can now go ahead and if you wish to edit the user, you can click open and further modify the information. But one thing that I always recommend that you do here is to click on manage fields right away. And that's going to open up the table design for you to see the fields of your directory. Now, if you wish to see more fields pertaining to your internal staff members, you can add them to this table because essentially a directory is a table, just like the ones that we created a minute ago. Okay. One thing that I always recommend if you're dealing with names, always have first name, last name in two separate fields, but also create one more to concatenate both the first and last name together. And Caspio has a data type called formula, like that. You're going to click on the edit link in the upper right and simply just input first name, last names, and put them side by side. And a little bit of syntax is needed in between here because you can't just do it this way. It's going to not even leave a space between the first and last name. It won't look good, okay? So what you want to do is just add a plus sign, right? Plus sign, type out space, and in parentheses, add a 1 and another plus sign. And now when you verify the formula, it looks valid. All it does is creates one space between the first and last name. You're going to click apply, hit save. And now if you wish to see your data, we should have John Doe and Sarah Lee. We can go to data sheet tab. And now you can see first name, last name, but now you have this field that concatenates first and last name. Very useful when you're building dropdowns. And let's say you're setting up an interview and you want to use Sarah Lee as one of the interviews, as one of the staff members. Instead of now seeing Sarah or Lee, just a single field inside a dropdown because you can have multiple employees with the same first name, you can select something a bit more unique, like Sarah Lee, which combines the first and last name. Now you can go back to your directory view once again. And if you do click on open for one of your employees, you're going to be able to see the first, last name, and full name. So any field that you add to your table, you will eventually be able to see here listed inside the directory as well. Now, the final step before we set up the roles and start building all of our forms and reports, if you go back out to the main menu and you go to data, one thing that I want to explain here is Bridge and Flex frameworks share tables. Okay, so if you have a table in Bridge, you can use that table in your Flex applications and vice versa. Okay, so what you want to do is simply find that table. That's your directory. Here it is right away. FDIR users ATS. Click more, click share, and find the application that we started developing. Click share. And now when we go back inside the application for Flex, here's our app, and you go to your tables, you're going to be able to also see that directory that lists down John and Sarah. So here we have our 9 tables that I mentioned as when we began building our application. All of them are built. Some of the tables are empty. There's no data inside it because we built it from scratch. And we are going to now focus on working on our roles and begin developing our application now that the tables are completed. So let's go down to roles. We have our public role. Let's open it. And if you're building any interfaces that are going to be open to the public, for example, this job board, everyone needs to be able to see the data. You want to change this permission to yes, because I want anyone to be able to read the data. Okay? We also want applicants to fill out an application form. So we also want to list down create, okay? Because we want them to be able to fill out forms. When it comes to updating and deleting, no, we don't want the public to be able to delete anything from the job board, and we don't want them to be able to update anything. The only functionality that we want them to be able to do is to read the jobs and fill out the application form. Click Save. Let's go back out to the Roles tab. And now let's create a role for our staff members. Let's start with HR. We're going to link to our directory, which is this one here, and click Create. So now we have an HR. It takes me inside the permissions. We want HR to be able to create jobs. We want them to be able to read. We also want the HR employees to be able to update data, and it's up to you if you want them to be able to delete information as well. Let's save the permissions and let's add users. Now you're going to click on Add User and move John Doe, who happens to be our HR employee, inside that role. Back out to the Roles menu and let's create another role. All right, let's give it a name. So role is going to be staff. And again, we want to select the same directory. Click on Create. And then we have our default permissions. Let's worry about the default permissions and custom permissions in just a second. For now, let's quickly go to the Users tab and add our single staff member, which is Sarah Lee, to that role. And now let's go to permissions and talk about the permissions. Now, the default permissions are for all the tables that you have inside this application. Okay? So for example, if the staff member has the ability to manage jobs, add jobs, along with edit interviews, add interviews, and things like that, then you're going to set up your default permissions up here. You can supersede those default permissions by using custom permissions. So for example, I don't really have a need for them to create anything. Okay? The extent of what I want the staff member to do is to log in, see the interviews that they have been assigned to, and also update the interview with our feedback. Okay, so there's really nothing that they need to create. But if you want them to create a job, then yes, you're going to go ahead and select yes here. For reading, I only want them to be able to interviews that they have been assigned to. So you can say yes here by default permissions. You have update if you want them to update something. Now where the custom permissions come in handy, if I want them to be able to see just the interviews that they have been assigned to, you're going to include that table. And then what you can do under read is simply say user's own records and select the user ID. Now when I log in as a staff member, if I have a report based on the interviews table, I will just see the interviews that have been assigned to my unique ID. When it comes to updating, yes, I want to be able to update because I'm providing my feedback. So here you can also select user's own records and click apply. No, I don't want them to delete anything. And I am not adding an interview. HR is creating the interview and assigning that interview to Sarah Lee. So now we can save our permissions let's go into our Designer tab. And once you go inside the Designer tab, this is where you're going to start building your forms and reports for this application. And you're going to be able to see everything that you're modifying in real time. This is the preview window to show you everything you're developing. And down here, eventually, you're going to go to deployment to publish your application. So we have public access, we have HR, and we have staff. Each role that you create is automatically created here inside the Designer tab, and this now corresponds to what's called a segment inside the Flex framework. And within each segment, you can create what we call app pages. App pages, as the name implies, is simply a page of your application where you can create forms and reports. Think of them like web pages. Okay? Now, the way I like to begin building my applications in Caspio, I always like to start off with a submission form so that we can input data into a table and we can already begin testing the forms, and then we can build reports to see the output. So if I'm thinking about this, I want the HR to log in and be able to create a job and also be able to view jobs. All right, so I'm going to build inside the HR segment. I am going to create an app page. Let's call this Managed Jobs. We're going to click Add. And there's my newly created app page. You can see how Caspio automatically creates the navigation for you on your behalf. You don't have to worry about that. So it's all built behind the scenes. Now, under Manage Jobs, I want the ability to filter and see the results. So we're going to click on Add Elements and drag in the search form. Very simple. You let go, and then you link to your jobs table because you're filtering data from the jobs table. I want the ability maybe to search based on job title, maybe department, maybe status of the job. And you can also do a date range if you want to, but let's keep things simple just for the interest of time. We're going to have these three fields. Click Next. And we have job title. That can be a text area. One of the things that I like about the Flex framework in the Appearance tab is you can have floating labels. So when you click inside the field, the label moves up, and then you can begin typing. We have department. Again, I'm going to use a floating label. Now, one thing, instead of text field, I like to create dropdowns. And we have a lookup table that contains all the departments. So instead of adding custom values, we simply go to lookup table. We find that table that contains all the departments. And you're going to sort by, and I always like to put none here. I want them sorted exactly how I have them in my table. So that's why I put none. And in the Appearance tab, again, I like to use the floating label. For my status field on jobs, we have active or inactive. So I'm going to show you custom values. So we're going to click on dropdown, Appearance, once again, floating label, and add custom value active for display name and active for value. And then we have inactive and inactive. Now, I could have done a lookup table for this as well, but I wanted to show you how you can create custom values. And because it's only two options, it's very easy for me to type that out every time I want to create, maybe on a filter form or on a submission form. And that's it. That's all we have to do. Let me just make sure in my Appearance tab I have a floating label. We're going to click Save. And there is my search function. I can now resize that if I want to. I can also center it. It's up to you. It gets a lot of fun when you have a lot more data parts on this app page, and then you begin moving things around for layout and the aesthetics and appearance. Now, as best practice, always name your data parts. Okay, and you're going to do so by selecting it and clicking on the pencil icon. And let's call this HR Filter Jobs. You can also add a heading to your form by going into heading field and just simply type out Filter Jobs. Click inside the app page, and then you're going to see that heading appear instantly. Now let's create our report that's going to list all the jobs. So we add elements. We go with a tabular report. Let's move that into our app page. Again, based on the jobs table, and what information do you want to display about your specific jobs? So maybe you have job title, job description, department, location, employment type, status, date created. We're going to hit next. And these are the fields that we can modify. One thing that I will do here is for job description, if you do want to list the job description in the results page, it is a tabular look, right? So you're going to have columns. And if you have long text for your job description, it may not look as good on a tabular report. That's why sometimes you want to create a details page when you're looking at your jobs. But here under this description, what you can do in the appearance tab is you can say instead of auto width, you can do a fixed width and maybe put 200 pixels. And then when you hover over, it's going to give you a pop-up where you can review the job description and read what you have inside that column. So with that, we can just click on save. And obviously we don't have any records inside the jobs table, so it's going to say no records found. And for new data part, let's rename that and call this HR job results. Also, we can add a heading. So we can just call this results, click back inside the app page, and you see the heading. And now we have these two forms side by side. In order for this to work, the filter form with the results, we need to select the tabular report now and set filters so that we connect this data part to this data part. So let's set up our filters, create a filter, and we select the job title, which is our very first field, and it needs to equal to, or in this case, let's do contains. Contains is more like keyword search. If you type in, let's say for your job title, you type in letter A and you click search, it's going to return all the results that contain letter A. We're going to link to our data part field. Manage jobs, that is the app page that we created, manage jobs. Filter jobs, so now we're linking to this data part, and this is important why we name our data parts. You can see how much easier it is to find because we gave this data part a name. And we link that to the job title and click save. And that's it. Now let's quickly build two more filters for both department and status. So department is equal to, because it's a drop-down, data part field, manage jobs, filter, department, and one more for status is equal, data part field, manage job, status, click save, save, and done. And just like that, we have a filter form that's going to work with our results page. I will show you the functionality here in just a second, but let's create the ability to add a job so we can populate information inside this tabular report. And what we're going to do is something very cool. Okay, let's set up another app page for HR. And let's call this create a job and move that inside the HR segment. Click add. All right, so there's my create a job app page. Let's turn this app page into an overlay window so it's a pop-up. So the effect that I want to have is when we go to manage jobs, you will eventually see me create a button up here to create a job, and it's going to open up this pop-up window where we have the ability to create the job. So let's add element, submission form, jobs table, and we want created by, job title. All of these fields are going to be included inside submission form. We're going to click next. Now the created by, we want to stamp the user ID, the HR user ID when they log into the app. So what you simply want to do here is make that field hidden. It doesn't need to be exposed. You're going to insert parameter, auth field, and it automatically selects the user's ID from that directory. In this case, it's going to be John Doe. It's a hidden field, but upon submission, it's going to stamp John's ID inside your jobs table. Job title can be a required field. Again, just for the interest of time, you can go to appearance and make some adjustments to your fields, but let's just keep things the way they are. Job description is going to be a text area. Department, we have tables, so we can simply link that to a lookup table for departments. Very simple. We have location, so this can be a remote position, or if you want to list down a city and state. Now, again, one thing that I didn't mention on the submission forms is you can make these fields required, right? So you can, even for job description, you can make that field required. Department required, meaning that the HR staff has to fill out these fields before they can hit submit. And then employment type, we also have a drop down for this as well. And we can look up a table for employment types. And last but not least, we have the status field. Now for this one, we do need to create this to be a drop down and add custom values of active and inactive, and then you add active. Sorry, let's go back here. This is going to be active. And for my second display name, inactive, and value inactive. Again, as I mentioned before, this could be a lookup table, but I'm showing you how you can add custom values as well. When you're done, click on save. And now you're going to be able to see that submission form inside that overlay window. Again, don't forget to go ahead and rename your data parts. So you can come up here in the pencil icon and just simply say HR, create a job. All right, you click save. Now, in terms of the appearance, I like to put these two buttons side by side. So you can click on the app page outside the data part. You're going to see controls. You're going to click manage and simply just move this button. And let's have that be above the close. Hit save, and now you're going to be able to see these two buttons side by side. Very simple, just drag and drop to rearrange the positioning of the buttons. And that's it. Okay. Now what we want to do is simply link the overlay window back to manage jobs. So what you're going to do is select the data part. And over here, you're going to find something that's called header controls. You can click add. Let's give it a label, create a job, and simply link to an app page that you just created that has that overlay window. You hit save. It's going to create that button here in just a moment. And now every time you click on that button, it's going to open up this app page that contains that submission form. And if you wish to now test things out, if you want to see what it looks like, you can go to deployment, expand your HR segment, and you're going to just toggle the deployment status to on. And now both of these two app pages are ready. You can simply just copy the link, or you can rename the URL to maybe a shorter path so it's easier for your users to remember. Or you can click on that link directly from here. Now, as I mentioned before, any app page that you create in Caspio Flex, you can have it be hosted by Caspio. Okay? But if you wish to embed into your own web page of your own website, you can click on deployment code, and Caspio gives you the embed code that you can use. Okay? So it's very versatile when it comes to deployment. I will click on the link. It's going to take me to the login page where I have to log in as John Doe at hr.com. And my password is test123 ! And now that I log in, we see no records found. And as John Doe, I can click on create a job, and that's going to open up that form for me to fill this out. And when you fill this out, you're going to be able to see that job listed right over here. Now, one thing you may be wondering, well, why do we have create a job up here in the navigation menu? You're right. We don't need to have that be exposed. We already have that button over here, which makes sense. So you go back to your designer. Let's go back inside the designer tab. Click on the HR segment. And when you click on the actual segment name itself, you can gain access to your navigation menu. You can also upload your company logo. But up here, you select your navigation menu, and you can simply just click on the little eye icon to hide that additional navigation item. You don't need to have that be part of your main navigation menu. Okay. Now let's continue building more app pages and more data parts for our application. Now that we can create a job, we can now start developing our public-facing interfaces, which is that public-facing job board. So I will just rename this and call this maybe job board. All right, and let's add elements. In this case, let's add a data part, and let's go with the tabular format. You can also create a search interface on the public side for your applicants to be able to filter out, maybe by department or something like that. But in my live demo, you saw we don't have a lot of open positions. So it was really easy to find the open positions and quickly read through it. So that's going to be based on the jobs table. And we want for our applicants to be able to see the job title. Maybe you want to show for what department that is, definitely location, so they know if it's going to be a remote job or specific city. Maybe you want to show them the employment type, if it's going to be a part-time or full-time position. And that's it, really. So let's click next. The job description we're going to include in the details page. Okay, so they have to click on the details link in order to see what the actual job description is going to be. Not going to make any changes here. Let's just click on save. It's going to say no results found because we haven't created any jobs yet as the HR staff member. Okay, but that's our job board. Okay, let's add a heading. We can call this open positions. Okay, so it will be helpful now on the front end to actually see a job. So if we go back to deployment, let's expand the public segment and let's go to that link. And by the way, you can share this link with anyone that's applying for any position. Or as I said before, you can embed this job board eventually to your own website. Okay, and it's going to have the same functionality. So let's quickly add a position. Let's refresh this page so we no longer see create a job up here. And let's add something now very quickly as an HR staff member. We'll say marketing specialist. We'll say you have 10 years of working marketing and creating content for various web properties. Something like that. Department is going to be marketing. Location can be a remote job. Employment type full-time. And status is going to be active. So we want this to be listed on the job board. We're going to hit submit. All right, so now as a HR staff member, we see that. And on our public job board, we also see that. However, we do want to make sure that we only list active jobs, not inactive. So we go back to our account. Let's go back to the designer tab. And for the open positions, we are going to set a filter here. Create a filter, and we want the status to equal to, and we're going to select a static value of active. Okay, so as long as the job equals to active, it's going to be visible here in our public job board. Because if we make the job inactive, I don't want that to be visible here in our open positions job board. Now we're going to create a details page for each one of our jobs. Okay, so the user is going to click on the details link, and from there, they're going to be able to apply for a position. So let's come back here, create an app page. Let's call this job details. Again, it belongs to our public segment. And here we are going to add a new element, and let's call this details page from the jobs table. So far we're only picking the jobs table, but at some point we are going to pick other tables as well for our main tables. So let's display job title, job description, department, location, employment type. And that's really all that I want to display. We are going to hit next. Not going to make any changes here. Remember, you can always go to the Appearance tab to make modifications to your layout, but I will simply click Save. And also, everything is going to be display only. In other words, read only. You don't want your applicants to make modifications to your data. Okay? We'll hit Save. And there it is. Now we're going to add our heading, and we're going to call this Job Details. I also want to rename my data part and call this Public Job Details. And I did forget to name my data parts inside the job board app page. So let's come back here and rename this one also to be called public. And we're going to call this open positions. All right, so we renamed our data parts. Let's go back to job details. And what I would like to have here is a button that allows the applicants to apply. And that's going to have another form that opens up, which is an overlay window that's going to allow our applicants to apply for these positions. Okay, but before I do that, let's create a new app page, and let's call this one application form inside the public segment. And for this app page, again, I want this to be an overlay window, very easy. We're going to add the element of submission form, and now we're going to use a different table of applicants. Because when the applicant applies for a position, we want their information to be stored inside the applicant's table. So we want name, we want their email, phone, resume. I also want the job description, but it's going to be a hidden field on the form. Okay, status, and these two don't need to be on the submission form. This is just in the back end for the HR to eventually see the score for, if it's a good match, and also the fit summary. Click next. Now, the name likely going to be a required field. Email is going to be a required field for them to fill out. Phone, resume is going to be a text 64,000, so they can paste their resume. Job description. Okay, we're going to make this field hidden, and we're going to insert data part field from job board, open positions, job description. Remember, we have the job description already available in the jobs table. The HR created that, okay, which was that marketing position. All we're doing here is on that submission form, we make that field hidden, but we also want to store the job description in the applicants table because the applicants table has the resume. So now we have the resume and the job description, and the AI can compare those two fields and let us know what the match score is going to be and the fit summary. Okay, simple as that. And finally, status. We're also going to make this a hidden field and assign a default value of new. And click Save. All right, there's our application form. Let's name our data part, public, applicant form, and click Save. Once again, I always like to have my buttons side by side. We click on the app page, we click on Manage, and you're simply going to drag and put this above the Close button. Click Save so that the Submit button is first, and then the Close button is second. And that's it. Now you go back to Job Details, and what you're going to do is click on the Data part, Header Controls, click Add. Let's call this Apply or a label, and you're going to select Open App Page and select the application form and click Save. And now we have the Apply button. Now, I did this on purpose just so I can walk you through on what else is missing in this workflow, which is the job ID needs to be stamped when the applicant submits the form. Okay, so when the applicant submits this form, we actually need to stamp the job ID in the applicant's table as well. And I did do that on purpose so I can walk you through it. So we select the data part, and you also need to include the job ID on that submission form as well. You're going to click Next, and for the job ID, you're going to make this field hidden, insert parameter, data part field, job details, and then you select the job ID. I wanted to show you that even if you don't do that initially, you can always go back and edit and connect your data parts and correctly pass these values. You're going to click Save, and that's it. Nothing is going to be visible in the form. It's all behind the scenes, and now it should all work correctly, right? So if we go back to our website, there is one open position, which is a marketing specialist. We need to be able to go to the details of this job. So we're going to go back to our designer tab, job board, click on the data part. And for the record controls, you're going to click Add. Let's call this details. And you're going to select the app page, job details. Click Save. Let's go back to our website, refresh the page. And now when you hover over, you can go to the details page. Oh, perfect. So page not found. That's because we haven't deployed these newly created app pages. So let's go back to our deployment. Let's deploy the application form and job details. You always have to deploy. Now you can refresh and we can see the details, the job details for that specific position. We can also hit apply, and there's our application form. So now as the applicant, we can fill out our name, email, phone, resume, click submit, and the HR staff member can review that position. Once again, to clean up our navigation menu, we don't need to be able to see job details here and application form. So you're going to go back to your designer tab, click on the segment, select the navigation menu, and the only thing that needs to be visible here is the job board, not job details and not application form, because we get to those data parts by clicking inside the job board and the details as well. I just want to make sure I have connected my job details as well. Yeah, so I do need to do that as the last thing here on the public side, is when I click on the job, I need to make sure I'm looking at the right job. So we need to set the filter on that data part, create a filter, job ID needs to equal to data part field from the job board, job ID. Click Save. What happens now is every time you actually click on this details link and you go to the subsequent page, it's going to show you the job that you just clicked on. So we need to set that filter, the job ID equals to job ID. So we go to details, we can now click apply. This is for a marketing specialist position. Let's go ahead and provide that same exact resume, which was a backend developer. Now, before we hit submit here, okay, before I fill this out, I do want to show you how easy it is to go through setting up the AI to get that match score and also fit summary. So let's do that first, actually. Let's close that. Let's go back to our designer. And now that we finished everything on the public side, now we can continue building a few more things for the HR members. So we are going to create a new app page, and let's call this Manage Applicants. So we are going to select our HR segment and click Add. So there's Manage Applicants. We want to be able to see the information that's coming in from that job board. Here we can now add a new element. Let's have a search form based on the applicants table, and we can search based on name, email, and perhaps phone number. Click Next. Name, likely going to be maybe a floating label if you choose to do so. Email and phone. I don't really need to make too many changes here. If you wish to have maybe an autocomplete feature, what that does is like Google search. If you start typing, it's going to give you options underneath the field what's available. As you continue typing, it removes other options from your search. So I'm just going to leave it as a text field. Click Save. And I will just maybe resize it a little bit. Rename my data part. Let's call this HR Filter Applicants. I will add a heading, Filter Applicants. I do want to say one more thing here is that I'm not too worried about the aesthetics, the look and feel. We can always modify that later. The whole premise of today's demo is just to get through all the functionality so that you can see how we wire everything together in terms of data parts and how we go about building this application using no code whatsoever. So that's the main purpose of today's video, but we can always come back, and if you're as meticulous as I am, you can always change things in the appearance later on. All right, now we need to be able to see who is applying for our positions, right? So let's build that data part as well. So we're going to select Add Elements, Tabular Format. Let's move that here based on the applicants table. And let's go ahead and take a look at maybe the name of the applicant, what position they applied for, their email, their phone, date applied, status, and I definitely want to be able to see the match score of AI and the fit summary so that I can quickly vet out, if I want to pursue this candidate and set up an interview with one of our staff members. When it comes to the resume, we can look at this in the details page. Okay, so let's click Next. And here we have the information that we want visible on that tabular report. We know we don't have any applicants yet. No one's applied, but let's go ahead and hit Save. It's going to say no results found. Let's reposition this to be next to our search form. Let's rename the data part to maybe be called Applicant Results. First, we're going to call this HR Applicant Results, and we're going to add the heading to be Applicant Results. Now, same as before, we need to now set up our filters so they work with this data part. So you select the results page and you set the filters, and let's do this very quickly. So we're searching by name. Let's do contains, select the data part, manage applicants, filter applicants name, and click Save. Let's add one more for email, contains, data part, manage applicants, email, save, and last but not least, we have the phone number field. So that's going to be contains, data part field, manage applicants, phone, and click Save. Those are my filters. Now every time I search, my results will instantly filter based on my criteria. All right, so maybe we can now test this out. Let's go ahead and go to deployment. Let's toggle this on for manage applicants. Let's go to that page. Actually, I can probably get to that page by looking at my existing one that I'm already logged in. So we have manage applicants at the top. We can go to that page. There's my filter form, but we don't have any applicants who have applied yet for any one of these positions. Now, before we go any further to apply as the applicant, let's set up that integration with OpenAI through GPT Connect. And we're going to do that next. So let's go back inside Caspio, click on the burger menu, and you're going to find what's called integrations. Or you're going to install AI-powered GPT Connect. If you haven't done so already, it's just a click of a button. You're going to click Add. I'm going to click on Open, and I already have in my live demo that we looked at at the very beginning. I've already set this up, but I'm going to walk you through it this time on how we can accomplish that. And it's super simple. Here's what you do. You're going to create the agent. You're going to give it a name. Let's call this maybe ATS for Applicant Tracking System, a Flex Match Score. For your profile, we have different profiles that you can create. I'm just going to choose a default profile and click Next just to speed things up. You're going to find that applicants table because that's where the response needs to be stored. So let's go ahead and just scroll down a little bit to be able to find the applicants table. There it is. And I want this to happen when the data is added into my table, right? So when the applicant submits the application form, we want to trigger this agent based on the event record inserted. We're going to click Next. Now, for the AI prompt, most important thing here is you're going to write out your prompt. Okay? So you're a recruitment assistant, compare the following job description and applicant resume and return a match score from 0 to 100. You're going to include your job description field and you're going to include your resume field. You just have to make sure that the field is inserted using the parameter up here. So you have data source field and you're going to include the job description and you also want to include the field resume. You're going to click Next and now you're going to select your target field. Where do you want that response to be stored? And I want that to be match score for my first one and click Create. All right, there's the first one. And the second one is just as easy. You create the agent. Let's give it a name. ATS Flex Fit Summary. Profile, default profile, click Next. Data source, again, applicants table, record inserted, click Next. Provide your AI prompt. And the only difference here is that I'm providing a different prompt here. I'm saying one sentence summary of how well this applicant fits the role. You include your two fields. You're going to hit Next, and then you're simply going to choose your fit summary field from the table. Okay, so you're comparing job description against the resume, and you're storing the response inside this field. You're going to hit Create, and you're done. Now you have both of those agents set up. So what should happen on the front end is when the applicant is reviewing this position and you apply for that position, you're going to provide your name. Let's go with maybe Scott Thornton. Let's go with Scott Thornton at applicant.com. Phone number, we'll just make that up. And let's go ahead and paste our resume. And the resume I'm going to paste here is for a designer actually who specializes in Illustrator and Adobe. And let's just see if it's going to give us a good fit. We're going to hit Submit. All right, our submission was successful. Let's go now inside as HR staff. And as you can see, we have a match score of 15, which is not a really good match. And then we also have the fit summary, which we can scroll to review and read. So not for a marketing specialist. A couple of modifications really quickly. If you're not pleased with the scrolling effect, you can actually change the column width to be a fixed width, and then you can hover over. So let's do that very quickly just so that you can see. We are going to navigate back to our application in Flex. Let's go to Designer. Let's click on Manage Applicants, and right over here, we are going to simply change the data source. And when you get to the fit summary, in the Appearance tab, you can say fixed width, maybe 200 pixels. Click Save. And hopefully that fixes the scrolling. All right, we no longer have to scroll, but when you hover over, now you can read that fit summary very quickly. Now, you're also probably wondering, how come I see the job ID here? I would like to be able to see the actual job title. So in Caspio, we can very quickly fix that by going into Tables, clicking into Relationships. And for those of you who have a database background, you're going to feel right at home here. You can include all of the tables from this application. You can link them together, and then you can use the settings to display values from parent tables inside child tables. So let's take a look and see how we can do that. And this connection is between the jobs and the applicants. So if you remember, when we built our tabular report, we included a job ID, but it's displaying me the actual job ID. I want to be able to see the title that belongs to that job ID. So what you can do is simply drag the job ID from the parent table to the child table. You let go and you get these settings. Caspio immediately identified that as a one-to-many. And what I want is to display the job title inside my data part. Okay, when you hit create, save your layout. By the way, you can link as many tables here as you want if you want to understand the schema and see a visual representation of your database. Now, when we go back to our app and we reload the page, we should be able to see the job title that the applicant applied for. Very, very simple fix. The next thing that we want to do is create a details link to review more information about this applicant and be able to schedule an interview. All right, so let's do that next. So we're going to navigate back to our account. Let's go inside the Designer tab. And inside the HR segment, we're going to add an app page called Applicant Details and click Add. Again, you immediately see this created inside the navigation menu. So if you want to, you can quickly go to your HR segment, click on it, and simply just hide the applicant details, because that's not how we're going to get to applicant details. We're going to get to applicant details by clicking on the applicant themselves. Okay? And right now, also, before you develop anything inside the applicant details, you can go to deployment and very quickly just toggle that on and come back to your designer. Now, inside the applicant details page, you're going to set up a details page based on the applicant's table. And what information do we want to display? Well, let's have name, email, phone, resume, job description. Oh, we don't need job description. I apologize. We want date applied. We also want the status. And if you want, you can include the match score and also the fit summary. Let's click next. Don't really need to make any changes here. Everything is going to be display only initially. Let's click save. And that's going to bring up our job details. So let's give it a name. Let's call this HR job or applicant details. And we're also going to add a heading here, applicant details. All right, we need to set up our filter, okay? In order for us to be able to see the actual applicant, we need to set the filter, and we want applicant ID to equal to data part field from manage applicants, applicant results, applicant ID. So that means when I actually click on the applicant and I go to the details, I'm going to be able to see the details that belong to that applicant. So we need to set up that filter. All right, and now you can test this out. So if you go back to your application, let's just say we reload and you hover over, you're going to be, oh, we haven't created the details link yet. So let's go back to our designer, manage applicants, select that data part. For record controls, click add. Let's call this details, and action is going to take us to the applicant details. Click save, and now it should work the way it's supposed to. Let's reload. Hover over, there's my details link. We click on it and it takes me to the details for that specific applicant. And from here, what we can do is set up the interview. So we create the button to schedule an interview, and we want to be able to display all the interviews here on the right-hand side. If you're not happy with the width of the applicant details, again, very simple to make those modifications in Caspio. You just resize it. You're going to be able to see these grids that you can snap into place behind the scenes. But then when you reload the page, you will see it's a lot more narrow compared to what it was before. All right, now let's set up a page to book the interview. Well, that's fun. So we're going to create a new app page. Let's call this one create interview or schedule interview. Schedule interview inside the HR segment. Once again, you will see a part of your navigation menu. My preference, I always like to go inside the HR segment and just quickly hide it because we don't need to see that. And then you go to schedule interview app page, and this is going to be an overlay window. We're going to add elements, select our submission form, select the interview table, and let's move What information do we now need? We want to be able to select the applicant ID, user ID. We need the interview date, interview type, and the notes, score, recommendation is all going to be for our staff members to fill out. This is all we need for HR to fill out. We're going to hit next. Applicant ID is going to be a hidden field, and we're going to insert the parameter data part field. Let's look for applicant details, applicant ID. So when you're setting up that interview, what you're basically doing is scheduling an interview for that applicant, but we want to stamp the applicant's ID in the interview table. And for the user ID, we want to turn this into a drop-down lookup table. Select your directory that contains all of your staff employees, which is this one here. That's the one that we created at the very beginning of our video today. And for display, here's really the reason why we created that formula data type in the directory table. So we can grab the full name of Sarah Lee as opposed to just first or last name. Okay, we select full name, and then behind the scenes, we actually stamp the ID of Sarah inside the interview table. Interview date, likely going to be a required field. Interview type, we have a drop-down for this that we can create, and then lookup table, we have interview types, which is going to be video, in-person, or a phone type interview. Sort by none. And let me take a look and see if there's anything else I need to change here. I don't. This is also going to be a required field. We're going to click Save. And that's it. So now we're going to be able to select the employee name that we want to schedule the interview with, interview date, and interview type, and click Submit. Click on the app page if you want to reposition the buttons. So we're just going to move this above the close button, click Save, and now they're going to be side by side. We have our schedule interview heading. That's perfectly fine. And now all that's left to do is to deploy this app page. So let's go to deployment, enable that, go back to Designer, and let's link this overlay window with applicant details. So we go back to applicant details, select the data part, and you're going to find header controls. Let's call this schedule interview. Select the overlay window app page that we just created to schedule interview, and click Save. You're going to see this button here in just a moment to schedule the interview. So the effect that we're going to have now on our website is once you're logged in as HR, you get to see that button. And when you click on it, we have now the ability to select our staff member that we want to set up the interview with. Interview date and interview type. I guess now that I'm thinking about this, it would have made more sense to create the time as well. What time is the actual interview? But you can expand upon this application by adding more fields to your tables. Now, before I hit submit, I do want to display the interviews for this specific applicant, right? So let's set up that tabular report here as well. So we're going to add a new element. Let's go into tabular report. We're going to place that on the side on the interviews table, and the information that we want to display, we don't need the applicant's name because we have the applicant's information already in the details view. But we want to know what user is interviewing. We want to know the interview date, interview type, and then maybe we can also include the results from the actual staff members. So the notes, the score, recommendation, and finally the status if the interview is completed or still pending. Click Next. Not going to make any changes here. If you want, you can rename the label. So instead of it saying user ID, you can say name of the user. Click Save. All right, no results found. Now, before we actually schedule an interview, we do need to set up the filter and make a few name changes. So up here, we're going to say HR applicant interviews. And then we're going to add our heading for applicant interviews. All right. And then we also need to set up the filter on that data part. The filter based on the applicant ID. So we want that to equal to data part field. And let's look for manage applicants, applicant results, applicant ID. Click Save, and now we're only going to be able to see the interviews that belong to that applicant. And everything should function the way it's supposed to. So let's go back to our website. Let's reload so that we can see that new data part that we created. Let's set up an interview. Let's go with Sarah Lee. Interview date, Friday. Interview type, phone interview. Hit submit, and we get to see that information. We don't see Sarah's feedback yet, but we will eventually once we set up all of that functionality. Again, if you wish to see, this is supposed to be the name of the person that's interviewing the applicant. So let's fix that very quickly by going into our tables and relationships, and we want to include the interviews table. So let's just reposition these a little bit. So if I want to see who is actually interviewing this person, we can include our directory table as well. And we simply move the user GUID field into the user ID. And I want to be able to see the full name of the person interviewing and click on create. Hit save. Let's go back here, reload. And now we know which person is interviewing Scott Thornton. And that's all I wanted to create for the HR staff. The ability to create job. Obviously, we can also have the capability to edit a job. So here you can create inside Caspio, if you go back to your designer tab, you can create a new app page to edit job. All right. And then under manage jobs, you can add a edit button to go ahead and do that. Why don't we actually just build that out anyway, since that was part of my original application, so people are not confused. So I am going to add a new app page to edit job that belongs inside the HR segment. We'll click add. Let me go ahead and deploy that really quickly. Go back to my designer. So there's my edit job, and I will make this an overlay window as well, because I'm a big fan of overlay windows. It makes applications a lot more efficient. Instead of having to navigate to a new app page, and on that app page you have a form, this is much faster to have everything load on the same page, and you can close and edit and do things like that. So let's add element, and let's have our update form based on the jobs table. And the information that we would like to be able to update is the title, description, department, location. Most of these fields are going to be editable. So employment type and definitely status. And that's it. Hit next. Don't need to make any changes here. Actually, I do. I need the ability to edit the job. So here we need to make a few modifications. If we're going to edit the job title, I need to turn this into a text field. Job description. Need to turn this into a text area. Department, again, you're going to just set things up like we did before. So this is going to be become a drop down where you link to a lookup table of departments, which you should already have. Location is going to be a text field. Employment type is going to be a drop down lookup table, and we have employment types. And then for status, that's going to be a drop down as well. And you're simply going to create custom values of active and inactive. All right, we're going to click save. All right, let me rename this data part. So it's called HR edit job. Click save. All right, click on the app page again, manage my buttons, and just position this up above. Click save, and now we have two buttons side by side. But again, I need to now make sure I set up my filters as well so that I'm editing the correct job. We're going to set up the filter where job ID equals to, select data part, and the app page here is going to be manage jobs, job results, job ID, click save, and you are done. Now, before we can actually edit that job, we have to go to manage jobs and select the data part, and you're going to find something here, record controls. You're going to click add, and let's call this edit job maybe as our label. And now you simply select the overlay window that we just created. And that's it. Now you're officially done. So if you go back to your manage jobs page, let me reload, and you hover over, you can now edit that job very quickly. You can deactivate or make that job inactive. And if we do that, let's say we make the marketing specialist inactive. Let's say we hired somebody for that position. We click update, and you go back to your public job board. You will no longer see that. But let's say that person left and you want to reactivate that job again. You are now going to edit, make it active once again, click update, return back here, and we should be able to see it. Because we have a filter set on this public job board to only filter active jobs. And that's it for HR. We are almost done. We just have to build one or two more app pages for our staff members, and this whole application will be completed, this applicant tracking system. So let's go ahead and do that. So let's build a new app page, and we're going to call this My Interviews for our staff. Click Add. So there's my app page. All right. And here we're going to build two different data parts. One to show open positions, or sorry, pending interviews, and the other one, all the closed interviews that we have completed. Okay, so let's add a data part. And let's go with the tabular report based on the interviews table. And the information that we would like to see here is the applicant's name, interview date, interview type, and then we also want to provide our notes, score, recommendation, and status. And click Next. Not going to make any changes here. Let's click Save, and let's rename this one, this data part, to Staff. Let's call this Pending Interviews, and click Save. All right, so that's my pending interview. I need to be able to see the applicant's name here, and then also be able to provide my notes, score, recommendation, and status. But before we move on, let's fix this really quickly in our tables. So let's go back here. Inside the relationships, this is with the interviews table. So there's my interviews table. We have our applicants table, right? So what we want to do is simply just connect the applicant ID, and we want to display the applicant's name. All right, click on create, and that's it. Now this is the parent table to our interviews, but when we build our data part based on this table, I need to be able to see the name of that applicant. So inside my designer tab, you will now be able to see the applicant name. Okay, hopefully that's not too difficult. If you ever get into a situation where you see the ID on the data part, but you want to see the actual name, you can go to your relationships, and there you can modify what information from the parent table you want to see inside the child table. Now, let's build one more data part, but before I do that, let me add a heading here. This is going to be pending interviews, ones that haven't been completed yet. I will add one more data part for completed interviews down below based on the interviews table. And probably the same information should suffice. Let's have the applicant ID, date, and I do want to see my prior score, recommendation, and status. So we're going to include that as well. Let's hit next. Not going to make any changes here. And these are going to be my completed interviews. So staff completed interviews. And for my heading, we're going to call this completed interviews. All right, we'll be able to see that here in just a second. All right, so obviously we need to set up our filters, right? We haven't done that yet. So for this one here, we're going to set the filter for this to be status equal to static value completed. Right, and hit save. And then for this one here is going to be pending. So we're going to set the filter, create a filter for status is equal to static value pending. All right, click save. Now, the reason why we don't see pending here, which we should, is I think that I made one slight mistake when it came to setting up the interview, when we scheduled the interview. Let me take a look at my form really quickly. Yeah, I did not include my status field on that submission form, which I should have, and I should have made that hidden field and have that be default value of pending. So now when you do submit the form, it's going to stamp that as pending, and Sarah Lee should be able to see it. But because I didn't do that initially and I set up the interview, let's find the interviews for Sarah Lee, and we can quickly change the status to pending here because I didn't originally submit that. And now under designer, if we go to my interviews, I will be able to see that here in preview because the status is pending. Now it's up to you if you want to include the status pending here. If you don't want to, that's fine as well, because it's kind of obvious from the heading that these are pending interviews. So again, it's up to you if you want to include that column. The final thing we want to do for our application, very simple, is to create the form that allows us to complete our feedback. And let's add a new app page, and let's call this Provide Feedback. Inside our staff segment, there is Provide Feedback. I will make that an overlay window as well. Add elements, update form based on the interviews table. And what we want are the fields for the feedback. So we want interview notes, score, recommendation, and status to be included here. We're going to hit next. Interview notes, this is going to be a text area, maybe a required field. Score, it's going to be a text field, required field. Recommendation, drop down. I'm going to do custom values here as well. Yes, no, and maybe you include a maybe. I don't know if that might be part of the interview process. And finally, status, we have also to be a dropdown and custom. Oh, actually, we do have a lookup table. I almost forgot. It's going to be a required field, but we have a lookup table for interview statuses, and that's going to list you either pending or completed. And that's it. We're going to hit save. There's my submission form. Let's give it a name. We're going to call this Staff Provide Feedback. Again, click on the app page so we can align our buttons. This, click save. So now they're side by side. And there is one more thing that we must do, which is to set the filter. So we're only looking at submitting this form for that specific interview ID. So you set up the filter. Interview ID is equal to, this is very important, data part field, my interviews, pending interviews, because it's based on that data part. And you want that to be set to that interview ID, and click save. All right, and finally, under my interviews, for this data part only, you want to create for record controls, maybe provide feedback is the label, and then action is going to be open app page, provide feedback, click save, and that's going to create that button for you now. And let's go ahead and take a look at this. We're going to go to deployment. And for our staff segment, let's enable both of these. And I will use, let me copy the link. I will actually use Firefox because both the staff and HR are in the same directory. So I would be required to log out as HR. I mean, I could do that. I can come over here and I can just go to up here in the user icon. I can sign out. But I'd like to have them opened up side by side so that if I'm testing my application, I can see the functionality for both HR and staff. So let me go ahead and open up Firefox. And we will paste that up here. And let's log in as Sarah Lee at staff.com. Password test. Oops. Test 1, 2, 3 exclamation. And once we log in now as a staff member, we get to see our pending interviews. We can see our completed interviews, and I can provide my feedback as Sarah Lee. Let's just type something in here, score maybe 5, recommendation yes, and status completed. Let's hit update. And right away behind the scenes, you can now see that this is a completed interview. I don't have the ability to edit anything here, but if a new interview is scheduled with me, I will log in and be able to complete that. Of course, in Caspio, there's so much more you can develop in terms of the workflow. This is really just the tip of the iceberg. It just gets a lot more fun when you start utilizing triggered actions on the table level and also tasks to do automation with emails and SMS messages. And then finally, how you create your application is entirely up to you. What data parts you include, what workflow you have in your application, what data parts are visible. Do you want to have these maybe be side by side? You can do that. I would just have to move this one outside that main one, and now I can put these two objects side by side. I can make them the same height. So again, hopefully you enjoyed the video and hopefully you saw what you can do with no code. This is just one example of an application you can build with Caspio. There are so many different use cases, whether that's a CRM, project management, inventory tracking. This is just one example of what you can do with the Caspio Flex framework. I encourage you to try Flex and Bridge if you're looking to develop applications with no code. If you are excited about what you saw in the video and you need some help and you're curious about if it's going to be a good fit, you can always talk to somebody at Caspio. No cost to you to get a free project consultation and get started. Yeah, so thanks so much for your time. If you did stick around the entire time of the video, or maybe you came back to complete the video, I hope you enjoyed it. And good luck building your own applications. All right, thanks so much, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.